So we've just spent another week putting the finishing touches to the restaurant here at Idea Farm, and actually on Thursday, with a bit of luck, we will get our alcohol license. We will be able to open for business legally, doing events. But why did we build a restaurant? Well, one of the reasons we built a restaurant is that in Sweden, if you want to serve alcohol, you have to serve food as well. There's no such thing in Sweden as a bar. It's always basically a restaurant. I think the law says that you need to serve 3 different hot dishes, starters and desserts. So it's really, you really do need to serve food. And obviously in this place, we want to be able to have concerts and events and exhibitions, seminars, that sort of thing. So we knew we would have to build some kind of restaurant space, or at least kind of cooking facilities, as we have done at the end of this barn. And obviously, those sorts of regulations mean it is kind of impossible to run certain types of businesses in Sweden and to do certain types of events in Sweden. But just as we are putting the finishing touches to our restaurant, it seems as though the law is about to change. I am reliably informed that as of June the 1st this year, in Sweden, you will no longer need to serve food when you serve drinks, which to the rest of the world probably seems completely normal, but and I've only been living here 3.5 years. To me, it seems like revolutionary. Anyway, this video, I'm going to look a little bit into the history of the Swedish alcohol laws, and also talk a little bit about my experiences growing up in England, which has an extremely different approach to alcohol than Sweden does. I find the whole thing very interesting. So please subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. So to unpick how we ended up in this situation, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century, when there was somewhat of a temperance movement sweeping the world. Alcohol was seen quite rightly as the cause of a lot of problems in society. And in America, for example, they had prohibition for around 10 years or so. In the 20s, I found out today that in Iceland, beer was illegal until 1988, I think, which completely blew my mind. So this was a worldwide thing, this kind of movement towards a more sober society. And in 1922, Sweden had a referendum to decide whether they should just ban alcohol altogether. And the results of the referendum were incredibly close. I think it was 50.8% of the Swedish population voted to keep alcohol in circulation. 49.2 voted to ban alcohol. Apparently it was mostly people in the north that wanted to ban it. Also a lot more women than men wanted to ban alcohol, which kind of makes sense. They were probably fed up with getting beaten up by their husbands all the time. So it was a very close call. As a result, Sweden entered a period of rationing for alcohol. And it also began this idea that you needed to serve food in order to drink. So people were rationed. Each person was allowed 100 mils of clear spirit, which I guess was some sort of aquavit or vodka type thing, and 50 mils of brown spirit, which I guess would have been whiskey or brandy, something like that. Not sure why those two were differentiated in that way. And I'm not sure how does beer fit into the equation. Anyway, it resulted in the situation where you would have basically these dummy plates of food which would go in and out of the kitchen with every drinks order, and according to what I found out earlier today, would often end up with cigarette ends in and would still come back out to be served to people until they just got too disgusting and they would have to make a fresh portion again. You would also get people waiting outside bars, offering to exchange their drinks ration for a hot meal. So it very quickly became a bit of a kind of black market, kind of workaround loophole society. Incidentally, women were allowed half the ration of men. For fuck's sake. So you can see that even back then there was a bit of a kind of theatrical approach to this whole law. Like, okay, we need to be eating, we're gonna like follow the law, but we're gonna find a way to still get around it. In 1955, they did away with the whole ration book thing, but that philosophy stayed behind, that you need to eat food. It's basically, it should be more about eating than it is drinking. You shouldn't go out for a drink, you should go out for some food, and the drink is an accompaniment to the food, or at least that's how I understand it. So now we fast forward to 2026, which, yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. I mean, I've been coming to Sweden for 20 odd years, and I've been very aware of the kind of relationship that Swedes have with alcohol. And already last year there was a big change. Last year the government agreed that independent small producers of alcohol, like vineyards or microbreweries, would at last be allowed to sell their drinks directly to the public, which sounds completely nuts that they wouldn't have been able to do that before. But before that law, if you went for a wine tasting at a vineyard, you wouldn't be able to buy a bottle of wine at the vineyard. You would then have to travel to the one shop in Sweden which sells alcohol to buy the wine that you just tasted, and maybe you'd even have to wait a week or two until they ordered it. So you can see why this was very frustrating for a lot of those kind of businesses. But last year they changed that law. So now if you go to a vineyard, you do have to take a little tour of the vineyard, but then you are allowed to buy a few bottles of wine, which seems pretty reasonable. And now it's 2026, and it seems like this summer, June the 1st, we will now be allowed to have an event and we don't have to worry about food, which is kind of interesting because it's definitely become part of our mentality when we've been organising events and putting in grant applications for events, and just our whole sort of concept of what events here are going to be like. We've always been building in a kind of food angle, which I think is really cool. I think it's cool if you come here to see a band play and somebody's doing something interesting in the kitchen, different to the last time you came, and the whole thing just feels like a kind of cohesive cultural experience. So I don't think it's going to affect us too much, although it's nice to know that we don't have to worry too much, and certainly that we don't have to do 3 hot meals, desserts and starters. I think that was always a bit of a stress, you know, but this way we can offer a very simple menu, like, you know, freshly cooked pizzas or something, and we can still open for business. So I grew up in England, in and around London, and England has an incredibly different relationship with alcohol to Sweden. It's something that I've thought a lot about since we moved here, partly because of the kind of logistical reality of living in Sweden and buying wine and stuff. You have to go to this special shop, which has quite sort of difficult opening hours sometimes. If you don't plan ahead, you could find yourself without any wine for your dinner party at the weekend, for example. And having grown up in a country where the concept of a pub, especially out in the countryside in England, the pub is really often the absolute like centre point of the village or the town. It's where people go to meet up and talk. I like to think of it kind of, it's like a sort of giant therapy room or something. People just go to talk about their problems, have a couple of drinks, loosen up, and as long as they drink responsibly, it's kind of overall a very positive experience. Having lived in Sweden for 3.5 years now, I do notice that big gap in the kind of community fabric. There isn't this kind of meeting place where everybody gets together and gets to know each other and shares their problems and socializes. Socializing in Sweden, as a result, feels a little more like you have to kind of plan it. You know, you have to sort of plan it in advance. And I mean, once it gets going, then everyone loves hanging out, and you know, it's great. But it feels like there is this kind of extra step that needs to be taken before that happens. And actually, I'm talking about England, but I mean, I lived in Berlin for 10 years, and Germany has an even more kind of relaxed approach to drinking than England, I would say. Somehow a more responsible approach to drinking, but there is really, in Germany, there isn't the kind of stigma that comes with people having a drink. I feel in Sweden it is kind of stigmatized somehow as a result of the regulations. Like, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I've certainly noticed since living in Sweden, I'm much more aware of my drinking habits. I kind of feel a bit more guilty somehow about drinking, which maybe is the point, actually. But when I go back to England, I feel that everyone's drinking like all the time. So yeah, it's a very difficult one to get your head around. But I do think that overall, this new law has to be a good thing, because if it means that more people can open interesting little venues without having to go through all the expense and kind of health and safety stuff associated with setting up a restaurant. I mean, it's cost so much money and headache and time and stress to do it. You know, we were lucky that we managed to buy most of the stuff in one lump from another restaurant that was closing down. But even so, it's just been huge, like the floor drains, like just everything. It's so much work to put together a restaurant. And I like the idea that someone could think, okay, I'm going to open an art gallery with a little bar in it, or like a Japanese style listening bar where you just serve great whiskey and you listen to records and those kinds of things, those kinds of like small social gathering places, or, you know, just like little music venues out in the middle of nowhere, like this place, but like even simpler, just a barn with a bar and a stage. I mean, it's amazing. There is so much potential here in Sweden. So I think it's going to be very fascinating to see what changes. Maybe nothing much will change, but yeah, let's see. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time for another video. Thursday, we get our alcohol license. All right, lots of love, look after each other, and goodbye.